We have been looking at this issue of the idea of being a movement and not a monument. So I have a picture I want to show you this morning. Again, we're thinking about what does it mean to be a movement and not a monument. So here's a monument for you. This is from a first century, well, actually it's not a first century, I apologize. This is from a Byzantine church that was founded actually in North Africa. If you know anything about the Roman Empire at its furthest actually spread south into the northern part of Africa, and Constantine set up Christianity as the new religion of Rome, and it was a really big deal because you remember Rome, even in the times of Christ, worshipped many gods. There were pagans and polytheistic society. Anyways, Constantine kind of changed all that, and the Holy Roman Empire started setting up churches everywhere this is one of the churches that they set up in North Africa. This is all that remains of the church they set up in North Africa. They found this site at the beginning of the year, this year if I remember correctly. But you see that little symbol? That's the Byzantine church stamp or seal there. That's its symbol. And I want you to kind of tune in on a few thoughts here, because there was an archaeologist who was asked a few questions, and one of his statements, he said, "I do not believe that there is anything of historical value to be found here." This was after he found the stone. Okay, "I do not believe there's anything of historical to be value here. It just appears that they walked out and left the church." So I could preach on that all day long. Number one, because the title of the sermon today is Fan or Follower. Okay, fans show up for a church and walk away for it. Okay, fans show up in an auditorium of some cathedral built to that sporting event, and they can walk away. But we're not trying to build a monument, we're trying to build a movement. But fans show up and they look at a monument, and a monument kind of marks history. This happened at one point in time. But the truth is, people can leave monuments and walk out and let it fade into existence like they did this church. That's a monument. We don't want to be a monument, do we? We want to be a movement. And movements don't fade into existence. Movements don't mark history. Movements make history. Movements are about followers that show up and they mark something different than it was before. And it's never going to be the same again. Now, are you a fan or a follower? Now, I'm a fan of football. And we've started football season. I want to admit, I cheated watching the Olympics and watched some football this week. I had NFL Network. I didn't have the NFL Network before. I have the NFL Network now, so I can watch the NFL all the time. And I'm not really in the big NFL. I also have the SEC Network, and I'm a big college football fan. And yesterday I turned the TV on to see if I could find my favorite college football team's game on, and they weren't on because I didn't have my calendar right, and they didn't start yesterday. What am I trying to tell you? Fans show up to a stadium and cheer. They set a record last fall at Arizona Stadium for the loudest stadium at any point in history. It's a new marker for Guinness. But let me tell you the truth. Those people who showed up and cheered their voice out at that stadium went home after the game was over. That's a fan. But we're followers of Jesus Christ. Fans come and go out of popularity. Followers go until their death, following Jesus Christ. So maybe we're going to have a little revival today. Are you a fan? Do you show up in the auditorium of Jesus or the stadium for Jesus here once a week and then walk away? Because that's a fan. That's what fans do. But a follower does something different. I could keep on going, but I want to focus on the Word of God. Acts chapter 2. Remember, we're looking at what the church did after Jesus Christ has died. Peter's preached his first sermon. The first Sunday we looked at this, we saw that we need to identify the flaws in our foundation and then bring those in for repentance and allow Christ to heal our foundations. The second week, we looked at how our entire life, our church, needs to be about Jesus Christ above all. That's why I keep saying, why do we gather here? It's about Jesus Christ. Really, I think some of us get it confused sometimes. And I'm going to step way out there on a ledge. Because some people come to me and they say, Daniel, I didn't really like that hymn. Inside my heart, I really want to say it's not all about you, it's all about Jesus. I'm more concerned whether Jesus liked it this week. Daniel, I don't like the way that this was done in worship service. I have my own style, things that I feel the most comfortable with, but it's not about me. We show up all for Jesus Christ. It's all for Him. This week, we're looking at this community of believers and the radical stuff that they started doing. Okay? Acts chapter 2. I even need to open my Bible. I didn't do that yet. Acts chapter 2. We're just reading 2 verses here to kind of close this sermon series out today. Every day they continued to meet together in the temple courts. They broke bread in their homes and ate together with glad and sincere hearts, praising God and enjoying the favor of all people. The Lord added to their number daily those who were being saved. This is probably the most telling part. I told you that we could probably spend a month of Sundays on this passage. This is probably the most telling part of this portion of Scripture. What's going on here is actually scandalous. It's controversial. It's countercultural. It's radical. It's way, way, way out there. So I don't know how best to describe this. It's un-Roman. That doesn't mean a whole lot for us. So let me parallel that. It's un-American. It is, if I could parallel that phrase for you, I want us to be good Americans. I think we live in the best country in the whole wide world. But I'm sure the Romans thought that too, and what was going on here was un-Roman. There is a huge, deep commitment that we see. Why am I making this such a big deal? Okay, so again, Christ was just killed. He has been resurrected from the grave. He has gone back and ascended into heaven. The Roman Empire thinks that there is some controversy going on. Some Christians have come and they've stolen the body of Jesus, and there's this big, deal going on, and they're looking for Christians. They're starting to persecute Christians now. They're starting to find them out and say, "What are you doing? Where's that body of Jesus Christ?" This is the dangerous beginnings of Christianity. And there's also the Pax Romana. You ever heard that term before? The tenets of the Roman Empire. The fifth tenet, says that any people that the Roman Empire conquer, they can still worship their own God. Like if they conquer Jerusalem, Jerusalem can still be God worshipers, but they can't bring any brand new religions in. And they still got to render unto Caesar. So what they're doing is starting a brand new religion in the middle of Roman society, in the middle of Jewish society. The Romans could revolt. And so the Jews are being extra sensitive right now because they're still trying to appease the Romans. They don't want the Romans to revolt. So the Jews and the Romans are all out to get the Christians and stamp out Christianity. And so now they're starting politically. They're starting small at the beginnings of Christianity. But by the time, just a few years after this, when Nero is Caesar, they're going to burn half of Rome down and blame it on the Christians. There's this huge, deep commitment to the early church, and what we find is that the disciples, the brand new converts, the 3,000 that just came to know the Lord, the 120 disciples that have already been out getting people saved, they're meeting every day in the temple. Do you hear the problem? Christians are meeting in the Jewish temple when Jews are out to get them and Romans are out to get them. They're showing up because for two reasons. They remembered the call of Jesus Christ. And Jesus said that the church, the temple, was his Father's house. And if we're going to follow in the way of Christ, if they're going to follow in the way of Christ, they could not neglect Jesus' Father's house, could they? They had to keep meeting there. Out of their deep devotion to Jesus Christ, they had to keep meeting there. Not only out of their deep devotion to Jesus Christ and his Father's house, Jesus also said that that place was supposed to be a place of prayer. So if you're going to go pray to Jesus or talk to Jesus, where are you going to go? Well, to the temple, right? And so they had this desperate inner need to keep talking to Jesus and worshiping our Father in heaven. And so they kept meeting in the temple. About scandalous, dangerous, because they were committed to the cause. Let me tell you how committed they were. And I'm going to, again, you guys know I like to get way out there. Let me tell you, we struggle with showing up once a week for 1 hour a day. When this passage says that they were showing up regularly, the regular times to show up at temple were 2 to 3 times a day for times of prayer. They weren't struggling to show up once a week. They were showing up at the temple 2 or 3 times a day as the believers of Jesus Christ. And they were praying and worshiping our Father in heaven. And we struggle with this is modern Christianity for you. I show up once a week for an hour, and that's enough. Or we're CEO Christians. Do you know what a CEO Christian is? Christmas, Easter, and other holidays. It's funny, but it's really not. Because we think that satisfies our Christianity, or that satisfies the church. But brothers and sisters, that's not what the early church was doing. That's not biblical. And it's time we got something straightened out in our own lives to figure out that's not the church. We don't show up once a week and call that church. That's a monument. And you know what happened to the Jewish monument they called the temple? It was torn down and destroyed in 72 AD and has not been rebuilt today. Are we going to be like that? Or are we a movement? Passionate people, dedicated to the cause. How dedicated? What's your measure of dedication? The example of the disciples were, we show up even when it's dangerous. It was enough for them. Only one of the original 12 died of natural causes. We're awful safe in here in Lillington, North Carolina, aren't we? It's not so controversial for me to show up here. It's not controversial for me to show up at the police station and pray in front of the police station. If I want to pray, lead a Bible study, that's not controversial. If I want to gather and worship in the middle of the courthouse, I could do that. That's not controversial. I'm not going to get shot for that yet. So what's your measure of faith? Because it's awful easy to be a Christian around here. Once a week, that's our measure. Showing up for Sunday morning, showing up for Wednesday night. It's kind of challenging, though, isn't it? Let me put it this way. Do you remember the Reebok commercial? This is like mid-'80s, okay? I'm telling my age a little bit. You're like mid-'80s. Mid-'80s, Reebok commercial, Life is Not a Spectator Sport. Do you remember that? Andre Agassi was starting his tennis career, and I tried to look for a video of that, but you can't find the videos anymore. All they have is the little newspaper ads they used to put on TV, in magazines and the newspaper. Anyways, the reason why I'm telling you this, because that actually didn't come from Reebok, that came from Jackie Robinson. Jackie Robinson once said, life is not a spectator sport. If you spend your life on the bench, you're wasting it. Wow. This is our bench. And sometimes we come and sit here and think this is the end, to sit. This is just the beginning. And we're starting a movement. They were starting a movement. They had a huge commitment to meeting regularly as a church, so much that they would put themselves out in public danger. And so they continued to meet, and it says, as I'm continuing reading in verse 46, every day They continued to meet in the temple courts. They broke bread together in their homes and ate together with glad and sincere hearts. Why is that important? Because it was, again, if you remember a few weeks ago, I told you that money was not the major currency, even in the Roman Empire, especially in the outlying colonies. What was the major currency was still bartering and trading. You need some meat, come to me and I'll fix your horse's shoes or something like that. And you give me this and I'll give you that, and they would trade one for the other. And so when it says not only did they meet on Sunday, not only did they meet, of course for them it was Saturday, Sabbath was Saturday. Not only did they meet for Sabbath, not only did they meet 2 or 3 times a day, they gathered outside the temple in their own home. These people were really religious, okay? They were really faithful. They started gathering in Christian homes. And what did they do in Christian homes in their gathering? They ate together, and they would sacrifice communal food. This is not a small thing. They were good Baptists. They got together and ate fried chicken. I'm pretty sure they didn't have fried chicken then, but you get the idea. But that's a joke. It was not a joke to them to get together and eat and sacrifice food for each other as a family. And what would they do? Ephesians and Colossians tells us what they did. They got together and sang hymns. Every time I think about this Acts chapter 2 passage, I think about David Platt. And I told you about David Platt. David Platt goes to a foreign country where it's illegal to be a Christian, and he starts sharing the gospel of Jesus. Some of the local pastors asked them for them to meet him in secret. And he met in a room with these pastors in a little, about the size of that little room that's right there behind this door, with about 40 pastors. Can you imagine 40 people being in that little room? You know what they were doing? Standing up with one light hanging from the ceiling. David standing underneath, and David Platt is the current president of our International Mission Board. Standing underneath that light, preaching and teaching to these pastors out of the Word of God so that they'd go and preach and teach to their congregations. I just want to think about it every time. Christians gathered and huddled in these little small rooms, and what were they doing? Singing the praises of the Lord. We struggle with singing a hymn. And they were singing, in fact, we believe that one of the first hymns is out of the book of Ephesians. They're sitting there singing these hymns to the Lord. And the hymns had to have been just right out of Scriptures, right out of the teachings of the apostles, which they had just gotten that week, you know. And then they started circulating the teachings of Christ and the letters of the apostles. In other words, they were really all focused on Christ, 100%. So when they gathered, it wasn't just to eat fried chicken. Even though I like eating fried chicken, don't I? They didn't just gather around a table and eat ice cream. Every time they gathered, it was for the glorification of Jesus Christ. And what they found was that as they were getting right with each other, as they were learning about Christ, as they were getting their hearts in order, as they were learning how to be obedient, holy people in the middle of pagan societies, as they were learning about Jesus Christ, they were getting right with each other, they were getting right with God, and they were finding the power of the Holy Spirit. In the turn of the century, I'm not talking about 1999 to 2000, okay? I'm talking about 1899 to 1900. In the turn of the century, there was this big event going on in Chicago, the World Symposium. 21 million people went to this event from all over the world. So this is not a small event. And it's actually 1893. In 1893, when this occurred, can you imagine 21 million people gathering from all over the world in Chicago? I mean, it wasn't like a third Earth or anything like that, but they didn't have planes, they didn't have ocean liners like we have now. It was different in the way that they sailed across the ocean and traveled to get here. It was different in the way our nation gathered in Chicago. D.L. Moody's a pastor in Chicago, and they were setting up at this World Symposium, a world parliament of religions that was showcasing the many different religions all over the world. Buddhism, Hinduism, things that we've never even thought of Islam. They were going to be at this place. And do you know what Dwight L. Moody thought? Great place to have a revival. Bought a circus tent, set up a circus tent, started bringing people in from this. His church members, though, wanted him to show up and start preaching against this world parliament of religions. He said he wouldn't do it. They wanted him to argue and defend Christianity against all of these other religions and these people that are showing up for this and speak about the evils of pagan worship. Whatever. He said he wouldn't do it. I want to let you know thousands of people came to a salvation knowledge of Jesus Christ because Dwight L. Moody stood up and did what he said he was going to do. We're gathering people to worship Jesus Christ, and that is all. It is enough that we have these spiritual gatherings and Bible studies and in worship, and that's enough. I don't need to add fried chicken to it. I even don't need to add a cool story about D.L. Moody. Jesus is enough for us. Once we totally commit our lives over to the cause and totally commit our lives over to these spiritual gatherings, you know, if I'm going to follow the passage, they broke bread together in each other's homes, ate together with glad and sincere hearts. Something started occurring among them. Because you know, if you put 10 people in a room together, you're going to get what? 10 different opinions. Okay? This passage says that they gathered together with glad and pure hearts. This word glad is actually a throwback from Luke chapter 1, or for them, the story of Zacharias and the message from the angel. The message from the angel comes down and tells to him, "Do not be afraid. I bring you great news." Do you remember that? This is that same word here, glad tidings, causing to rejoice. News that causes you to rejoice, being joyful because of something happened. They gathered because of what Jesus Christ had done in their lives, and they were glad to gather in His name. I don't know if you guys noticed what I was doing while worship was going on. I was trying to get my boy to pay attention because he was doing this number. Don't laugh at him, because some of us show up and we're adults to worship Jesus Christ doing this number. Is that a glad heart? Is that a glad heart? I show up because I'm excited, and I'll sing whatever you give me to sing because He died on the cross for me. I'll take up the offering anytime during the service because Jesus Christ died on the cross for me. I will come to the altar because Jesus Christ died on the cross for me. There is no cause high enough that I will dance a jig in here for you because Jesus Christ died on the cross for us, for His holy name and for His glory alone. John Piper said something really interesting. I'll tell you that in a minute. I'm going to skip ahead if I don't watch myself. Glad and sincere hearts. Glad. Sincere, though, refers to not truthfulness or not being honest. Sincerity in Greek for these guys was a farming term. Some of us know about farming. Some of us understand farming. When you have a lot of rocks in your field, it's hard to grow stuff, right? This sincerity was a term to a field that didn't have a lot of rocks in it. It had kind of become uniform and was good to grow stuff in. And so not only did they meet out of glad tidings, causing to rejoice, but they were all together. And their conflicts, their rocks had dissipated. Why? Because they saw Christ for who He was and each other for who each other are. And when you see Christ for who He is and each other for who each other are, things kind of fade away compared to Jesus. We're all on the same playing field. You remember that sermon? We're all in this together. That's what I'm talking about. They had unity in the church. So I kind of let the cat out of the bag with that statement. This passage is all about the church. It's about the congregation. It's about the body of believers being together in unity on one accord. Now, that doesn't mean they agreed on everything. That just means they weren't out to get each other. That didn't mean that every now and again they didn't have to sit down and kind of debate the issues of Christ. But what it did mean is there wasn't any hypocrisy between them. They weren't out to deceive each other. They were there for each other. You put these two words together, the idea of being uniform and in unity. I can't go any further without me saying if there's anything separating us this morning and causing disunity, we need to bring that to Jesus. That's not biblical. We don't need to hold it. We can forgive each other. Okay? When you put these two terms together, this issue of spiritual unity and this issue of coming together to rejoice, what you get are people that are excited about the church of Jesus Christ. People that are passionate about following Christ. They're not going to fade away. They're not going to disappear. They're not going to be quiet. They're going to keep worshiping the Lord in whatever manner God enables or calls for them to do. And what's the outcome? What's the outcome? What happens at the end here? I don't like drawing too many allegories out of Christ or saying that one thing is this and it has to be that. But they were getting their lives right with each other, discipling each other, multiplying each other. They were sharing Christ among other Christians. They were being obedient to Christ with passionate, exciting worship and teaching. And what happened? Well, look at verse 27 with me. Praising God, enjoying the favor of all the people. That's the scandalous part. They're meeting in the middle of a bunch of pagans and Jews, and because of their worship, because of their Bible study, because of their unity, because of their passion for God, they were gaining favor with all the people. Now, it says all the people. It's not talking about all the 3,120 Christians that we know about so far in the book of Acts. It really meant all the people. All the Romans that were gathered there, and they worshiped other gods and were supposed to be figuring out what's going on with this Christian conspiracy. They started looking at these Christians, started going, wow, those Christians. All the Jews that had crucified Jesus Christ, that were meeting in Jerusalem, started looking around at those Christians and started going, wow, those Christians. Do you know what favor is? Favor is not something you do in response to somebody else. Like you come and mow my yard and I'll come and trim your hedges. That's not. You do this for me, I'll do something for you later. No, that's a favor. Favor is when you turn your positive affection towards somebody or something. So they turn their positive affection towards this fledgling church that was getting started. Because when we get our lives in here right with Christ and focus only on Him, it has effects out there. We become completely committed to the cause of Christ. We become completely committed to these spiritual gatherings. It has effects out there. The unchurched starts to take notice. I had one of the most powerful compliments ever given to me. Actually, it took me weeks to get over this compliment. And it's not about me. I just want to share the words of the compliment. Somebody once looked at me and said that Jesus Christ is so evident inside of you. It's like, wow. Number one, I know how sinful I am. I know the real Daniel. I know the Daniel that is embarrassed sometimes about stuff that he does. And you can see Christ inside of me. I know that I struggle. I know that I love God. But that somebody said that they could tell Jesus from the way that my conduct was in my life. That's powerful. Did they say that of you? They should say that of all of us. That, wow, Jesus Christ is so evident in you, and I want to get to know Him. Look at Lillington Baptist Church and say, Jesus Christ is so evident in you. I've got to get to know what's going on. So this begs a dangerous negative question. Why aren't we having such a big impact on the unchurched outside of here? This is our third revival point today. Why aren't they flooding in from the droves from out there to in here? Could it be? Could it be? Because we're not passionate and excited about the Jesus that we meet in here. Could it be that we focused or have found so many other things to focus on in our lives, personally in our church, that his fame doesn't go out from this place like it should? Could it be that some of us need to come forward this morning and lay some of those things at the cross of Jesus Christ and say, God, I'm sorry I've made some of these things about me and not about you. Maybe we need to come forward as a church and make a commitment today that Jesus Christ, this place is all about you. Maybe you need to bring your family up today and say, we as a family do some other stuff, but we show up our once a week, but that's not enough anymore. Our lives are all about Jesus Christ. That's the church. Anything else, I don't know if I can call that the church. But we are the church now, aren't we? So I believe God is calling us higher today. One last story to share with you about the 40 martyrs of Sabas. This is around 330 or 340 AD, kind of near the time that beginning church was getting started. There came a new rule out before Constantine took ownership or rule of the Roman Empire. And the new rule stated that if you're a Christian soldier, you had to lay down, or if you were any soldier, you had to pay homage to Caesar and the god of Caesar. So whichever pagan god Caesar worshipped, the Roman soldiers had to worship. But there were these 40 soldiers of the high Roman guard that were Christians and believers, and they wouldn't bow down. They wouldn't recant. They followed Jesus Christ, and they wouldn't do anything else. They persecuted them. They threatened them. They yelled at him. Finally, they put him in the middle, at the edge of a freezing cold lake. Now, I'm not talking about freezing cold like North Carolina freezing cold. Okay, this is Europe. This is like Canada freezing cold. And made him stand there all night long until either they died or walked out recanting Jesus Christ. One soldier walked out and recanted. The other 39 stayed in there all night long. So much so that there were guards standing at the beach front there of that lake, and they were, if anybody came up and they didn't recant, they were supposed to send them back. The lead guard took off his armor once the 39th one started walking out and surrendered his life to Jesus Christ on the spot and walked his way back in there. And 40 soldiers died on that day for Jesus Christ. What does that tell you? Number one, it talks about the passion of people who should follow Jesus Christ. Our measure is that we give our entire lives over. Those men actually in the middle of the night could be heard singing their their third century Christian hymns to Christ. So much so that their lives represented and saved one of the pagan soldiers that were up there, because that pagan soldier could see the fame of Jesus Christ in those other 39. And so Christ is calling us to do the same. I know it's hard. It means sacrificing some old stuff. It means surrendering. But I have not found that anything that I've ever given up for Jesus Christ that we've ever really missed. I know it means changing the order of our lives, but if we have to change our orders to get in line with Jesus Christ, we probably need to change them anyways. Because we're not here trying to build a monument that people come into. We're not the fan coliseum of Jesus Christ. We're passionate followers of his movement. And he's calling you today to join the movement. Will you bring your family? Would you come as yourself? Would we as a church be committed to being passionate followers of Jesus Christ? We're going to sing a hymn of invitation. I'm going to be down here. Maybe you need to come forward and say, you know what? I've been a fan of Jesus Christ today. I need to be a follower. Maybe you need to come forward and kneel down and say, you know what? I've been holding some stuff higher. I've been worshiping or causing some other things that have greater passion in my life besides Jesus. And today I surrender and give those things over to Christ. Maybe you need to come forward and join our church. We would love for you to join our church. We want you to be a part of our fellowship. Come forward and chat with me. I'd love to tell you how you can do that. Maybe you need to come today and say, I was never a follower of Jesus Christ. I'm not even a fan. But because of your Jesus that you spoke of today I want to be a follower. You respond as Christ has led. This is a song of invitation. It's not my invitation to you. It's Jesus' invitation to all of us to become more like him. Let's stand and respond.